Hi, so in this video I'm actually going to be talking about the whole Meghan Markle and Prince Harry and Piers Morgan situation, but primarily with interest in defending Piers Morgan, because I think that looking at the timeline of events and the timeline of his acquaintance with Meghan Markle, this represents, to me at least, a man who's a bit wounded. And also, on a broader sense, in a political and socio-political sense, it sort of represents, I think, a real disalignment between British and American press, and also a lot of, I think, undertones of anti-Americanism in the United Kingdom. I know that British people are not too willing to admit this, but I do think that this is actually something that exists in Britain. I think it has something to do, I think, mainly with the paradox of sort of the cultural influence of America and America being a superpower, while simultaneously this notion that Americans are stupid or Americans are dumb, and especially with the recent election, etc. And I think that this definitely plays into a lot of the opinionated journalism that Piers Morgan puts out there, especially in the Daily Mail. So, according to Piers Morgan's Twitter page, Meghan Markle initiated contact with him back in 2015, and this was in response to him deciding to follow members of the cast of Suits, which was the American sitcom, I believe, that Meghan Markle starred in, and him following her resulted in her direct messaging him on Twitter, and that's how they got into correspondence. And he recently actually posted a screenshot of the initial DM that she sent him, and it seems to be very civil, very nice, and from this basically a sort of, I wouldn't say necessarily a deep meaningful friendship, but at least it appears to me, and this is all my opinion, it appears that a acquaintance, but an acquaintance that was sort of online, but also in which a lot of personal things could be shared. But I think that these personal things were primarily to do with politics, with broader social things that they could talk about because he was a journalist and because she was an actress, but also because he actually admits to seeing her as being a bit different to the rest of Hollywood, at least the stereotype that he, and I think a lot of British people have of Hollywood and Hollywood actors. She appeared to him to be authentic and very real, very down to earth, not somebody who was searching or looking for clout. So moving to 2016, Piers Morgan alleged that he had been in continual sort of online contact with Meghan Markle, and that this eventually led to face-to-face contact when Meghan Markle came to watch and support Serena Williams at Wimbledon. So I've gotten a lot of my information and a lot of my research actually from the tabloid press, because, as I said, the tabloid press in the United Kingdom is very influential, it's very impactful and very out there, and I have tried to refer to other sources, but I do think that the tabloid press, even if its information in and of itself is not accurate or is sort of swayed and very opinionated and to an extent manipulative of an audience, I do think that it does actually, insofar as what it is and what it constitutes and what it represents something quite interesting. So Meghan actually met Piers Morgan at a London pub called the Scarsdale the Scarsdale Tavern pub. And Piers actually said, as is quoted in the Metro, "We talked about life and the universe and Donald Trump and everything. Her days as a deal or no deal suitcase girl, and I thought, what a delightful person." This is important to remember, I think. Right, so going further into 2016 is interesting, especially with regard to Piers's initial meeting with Meghan, because on this trip she actually went to a private members club where she was introduced to and effectively set up with Prince Harry. Now, in short, Piers Morgan claims that as soon as Meghan met Prince Harry and started her relationship with him more seriously, he never heard from her again. And this is also in 2016, I believe, I think later 2016, when accusations of Meghan ghosting individuals, not just Piers, were starting to circulate. I think that this was mainly spawned by the tabloid press. To an extent, I think that Piers may have been a little wounded by the fact that he inadvertently, and definitely not directly, but sort of indirectly, contributed to Meghan and Harry's paths crossing. I think one newspaper actually described it as him effectively putting her into the taxi which drove her to her future husband, which I think is a bit excessive. But nonetheless, I do think that, you know, some aspects of that are plausible. I think it's mainly circumstantial, but he was definitely a contributing factor and influence of that circumstantial fact, as it were. So with this in mind, 3 things can be established, I believe. Firstly, Piers was drawn to Meghan because, in his own words, she was not like other Hollywood actors, very similar to the not like other girls trope. Secondly, Meghan decided to completely ignore and cut all communication with Piers Morgan. I don't know if this was intended because she didn't see their relationship as being as meaningful as he did. There was a lack of communication, sort of 2 ships passing in the night, or whether it was a calculated decision to actually cut off communication with somebody who didn't necessarily represent the image that she was maybe going for going forward into her life. And that's completely fine either way. But nonetheless, she cut all communication with him. What this thirdly highlights is that my first point about Meghan being, according to Piers Morgan, authentic and engaged, and the second point about her then subsequently cutting ties with him, contradict each other. And I think this is where sort of journalistic objectivity sort of flees the scene a bit, and more of the sort of personal association and relationship that Piers had with Meghan comes into the fore. So, moving swiftly on to November 2017. At this point, Meghan and Harry are engaged, and Piers actually congratulates them in his regular column in the Daily Mail. And this column is titled, "Hearty congratulations, Harry, you picked a real keeper, even if your romance did destroy my beautiful friendship with the amazing Meghan Markle." This is very insightful, and I found this very insightful reading this article. The fact that Piers considered his acquaintance with Meghan to be a beautiful friendship is neither here or there. He definitely, based on his recent claims and recent accusations, seems to have really valued his acquaintance with Meghan Markle, and that can't be disputed, and he has every right to express his hurt and his feelings regarding this. So I think this also makes it quite clear that even back in 2017 he considered this to be the fact, and this also suggests that there was definitely a break of communication between them, which I think is important. In 2018, Piers was actually in support of Meghan's decision to cut ties with her father due to their strained relationship. So in May of 2018, Piers was supportive of Meghan's decisions regarding her private life. And you know what, that's... I mean, it's Meghan's private life. She can do whatever she wants to do, and that's fine. Piers is also simultaneously completely allowed to have his own opinions on that. And so, you know, good for them all. However, in July of 2018, things sort of switched on the part of Piers. Maybe reality hit that Meghan was getting married, and green envy sort of spawned. I will not say that. So 2 months later, in July of 2018, Piers Morgan's opinions on Meghan Markle, and not just the matter of her strained relationship with her family members, started to really sizzle at the surface of his articles. In his column, Now, he writes, "If you're truly a humanitarian, Meghan, then show some damn heart to your loving father before he succumbs to a broken one." So just 3 days before the wedding, Piers Morgan actually writes another column, and he describes Meghan and her family as follows. "The Markle family are," and I quote, "a bunch of repulsive, PR-crazed Kardashians exploiting their girl's royal romance for as much money and residual fame as they can squeeze out of it." From this, I think that his argument, even if it wasn't made terribly clear in the article, was that this entire sort of fiasco about Meghan not inviting her family to the wedding could have been avoided if Meghan and Harry had just invited the family to the wedding, which is a fair enough argument. But at the same time, in defense of Meghan in this sense, it's her wedding day, it's her special day. She should be surrounded by the people who make her feel most loved and comfortable. And if her family does not make her feel that way and she wants to completely separate herself from them in order to actually enjoy this beautiful moment in her life, then she has absolutely every right to do that. And so I don't agree necessarily with what I believe to be Piers' argument on this. I think that it is completely valid for somebody to cut their family off if they feel that, you know what, it's going to be more hassle than it need be, and it's going to be more of a problem, and it's going to just ruin my day. And to be fair, if her family are, as Piers claims to be, PR crazed Kardashians, then you probably don't want them at your wedding, especially a wedding in which you're marrying into royalty. Right, so in my notes I wrote the following on this. I said, okay Piers, this is cute. However, it is her wedding and she can therefore invite or not invite whomever she pleases insofar as it is her special day. Following Piers' line of argument, inviting her family would have merely brought the entire fiasco to the actual wedding itself, potentially making it anything but a special day, memorable for all the wrong reasons. Secondly, if the British tabloid press had not paid so much attention to her family members in the first place, quite literally hunting them down and adding fuel to the fire, which I would argue was initially perhaps a few flames, none of the so-called PR crazed exploitation would have or could have taken place. And I still hold by that. So from 2019 to 2020, Piers Morgan's sort of media crusade against Meghan increased substantially. So Meghan had a baby bump shoot in which she announced to the public that she was pregnant, and Piers Morgan called this cheesy, even though Kate Middleton basically did exactly the same thing. And he also claimed that the couple don't actually want privacy and that they are in effect just looking to promote themselves and establish a brand around themselves, which I think is perfectly right. That is what they are trying to do. In fact, that is what all the royals are trying to do. The royal family in the United Kingdom is a brand. They sell their image. That is what they are. They are said to promote tourism. I personally do not believe that this is the case. I think that the fact that you can't even see them is weird. Even if there was or wasn't a royal family, people would come just to see sort of the royal monuments and the museums and things like that. And I don't believe that the British royal family is as significant a contributor to tourism as people like to perceive, just because their face is sort of pasted on everything. I think that everything would still exist and still draw people, irrespective of whether Queen Elizabeth's face was on it or not. But that's an argument for another day. Being a royal is largely about getting the media on your side, and the important relationship and the seemingly invisible relationship which the royals have with the tabloid press in the United Kingdom is significant. It is very much a relationship which is not based on, I think, journalistic integrity, looking at the royal family and actually providing critique. I think there are publications in the United Kingdom that do this. I would say that it is sort of very much exclusively attributed to more left-wing and liberal papers such as The Guardian and The Independent, which are far more critical of the royal family insofar as it is the figurehead of an institution which they consider to be archaic, as opposed to what the majority of the British population read or gain their information from, which is the tabloid press. The tabloid press provides less so journalistic insight into royalism, as opposed to providing sort of very emotive opinion pieces, very much feeding into trying to fuel patriotism, a good positive image of the royal family. And the royal family definitely depends on this, and I'm not saying that this is either right or wrong. I'm just saying that it is something that should be considered, especially from, I think, an audience that is seeing this and seeing, for instance, the Oprah interview from beyond the United Kingdom. I think there is definitely this perception in the UK that the press needs to be on the side of the royals. It's not deemed right, it's not deemed supportive of land and country to not support them, at least for an older generation. I do think that there is a generational divide, which a recent YouGov poll actually showed. In my notes, once again, I speak a lot better when I actually refer to my notes. In my notes, I write the following. Being a royal is largely about getting the media and those who consume that media on your side, which I think after the very tragic death of Princess Diana represented. I think this showed how important it was for the royal family to actually utilize the media, and they have done that and have done that pretty successfully. I say that they've done it successfully because the institution of royalism is completely contradictory to the politics of the United Kingdom and the Western world in general. It's completely contrary to the primary tenets of democracy, which is, and it's interesting that it still works, even if it is just a symbolic branch of government. It's nonetheless still a branch of government, and sort of the ceremony that goes around it, the taxes that go to it, the money that is spent by the public and by the media on creating this aura around the royal family, that is a lot. That takes a lot, not just of capital, but a lot of willpower. And so, you know, it is something that doesn't naturally gel with the principles of a democratic, liberal society. I don't think Meghan or Harry are under an illusion that they can completely take themselves out of the public eye. I think that is something which they have expressed, that is something that they are vying toward. I do, however, think that they realise, and I think people should be more appreciative of the fact that that is not something that can just happen overnight, especially when, for instance, Harry's entire life has been documented publicly and very invasively to millions and millions of people worldwide. In the short term, that is an absolutely impossible thing to do. It's completely impossible for them to completely separate themselves from their media image, from their branding. And I think it's perfectly acceptable for them to actually do this interview. I think it's an example of them taking themselves back, but also not so far as completely segregating themselves rather dramatically from the media. So in June of 2019, Piers compares the lifestyle of Meghan and Harry to that of the Kardashians, and he writes the following, and I quote, they both, meaning the Kardashians and Harry and Meghan, use social media to aggressively promote themselves and their families, including posting very similar images of their new babies. And they both like to shamelessly live their lives surrounded by lavish cars, homes, and flunkies. Very insightful, Piers. Interestingly enough, if you just take Meghan, Harry and the Kardashians out of that and put in the royal family, the exact same argument applies. The royal family also use social media to aggressively promote themselves and their family. They also post very similar images of their new babies and children regularly online and through the print media and the tabloid press. Hello magazine is literally dedicated purely to the promotion of the royal family. There's an entire magazine. I mean, honestly, the royals are the Kardashians, just with old money and less money going toward plastic surgery. don't think there's much difference. Oh yes, and they're a lot more multicultural, but you know, it's just, and they're American, but sort of the essence of it, I don't see much of a difference. I think this argument could be applied in any way. I mean, Kate Middleton's wardrobe is just, I mean, her wardrobe for this season cost more than the amount of money that I will earn in a lifetime, guaranteed. So, you know. And this is because they are, like Meghan Markle and the Kardashians, they are wealthy elites and they are celebrities. They are famous. This is a self-fulfilling prophecy. They live the lavish life. They promote the lavish life. People are in awe of the lavish life. That reinforces their brand, their image. That is what it is. That is what it is. So it's perfectly understandable in the context of fame, fortune, and being an elite in the 21st century. Comes with the territory. I do, however, think that a lot of this is not necessarily Piers critiquing broader elites or broader Kardashians. I think the point that he's trying to make, and has quite badly and poorly made, is that he saw Meghan as different. Again, like I said, sort of not like the other girls trope. He saw her as being not like other American celebrities, emphasis on the American. I think he has a blueprint, like a lot of the British tabloid press have, which compares Meghan to Kate Middleton. I don't think Piers directly does this because he has more of a personal association with Meghan, but I do think that his blueprint is very much his image of what a British high society woman is or should be, and he saw her as not being like the social media influencers, which are very Americanized and all about sort of the clicks and the likes and getting people on their side and being woke and presenting themselves as political insofar as it's trendy and will get them the clout and media infamy that they so badly want. I get that, and I think what he's trying to get at, without necessarily baring his heart, because I do think he has sort of a very masculine persona that he likes to put on and that he's been very vocal about in the media. I think he's been hurt. He has been hurt by a woman who he considered to be sort of an exception to the American celebrity elite standard, and who he got on with and was very well acquainted with, and who he considered to be a friend, who he considered to be in a beautiful platonic relationship with. So I think July of 2019 presents a very interesting time, which sort of leads on to a broader topic of the very different cultural and socio-political expectations of British royalty and, well, just of British and American societies in general, but specifically with this, with British royalty and, say, American celebrity. So from this point, Piers begins to increasingly call out Meghan Markle's behaviour and claims that she isn't fulfilling her duty as a member of the royal family. This was mainly in response to Meghan not meeting with then President Donald Trump on his official visit to the United Kingdom. Her explanation for not meeting him was that she was dealing with being a mother. Understandable. Perfectly understandable, and you know what, if that was the reason, then great. If it wasn't, great. In 2019, Meghan was also asked to feature as the guest editor of September's edition of Vogue magazine. So in his article in the Daily Mail, Piers wrote the following: "News that Buckingham Palace had let her do it, that is, let her not meet with Trump and seemingly, according to Piers, edit Vogue, is a big surprise though, because Meghan is now supposed to be a member of the royal family and not a publicity-craving celebrity, and being a royal means you stay out of politics." You can see sort of, I think, the different approaches between Meghan Markle and Kate Middleton based on sort of how they featured in Vogue. Kate Middleton actually featured in Vogue in the 2016 issue, and sort of comparing the covers, the cover that Kate had of her and the cover that Meghan has of her, you can see the very different approaches of both women. And I do empathise and understand why Meghan would want to guest edit Vogue. It was, according to sources, her decision and her idea to do it in the first place, and I think that this was her way of having more control over the British media in a way that she wanted to. She was able to portray herself and something that she cared about in a way without the British tabloid press manipulating it and sort of tainting her image. This raises some very important questions and lines of argument, and I'll refer to an article that was published 5 months ago in The Guardian, in which Meghan and Harry were criticised and accused, at least by the British media, of breaking protocol because they encouraged Americans in a public video during the US presidential election to use their right to vote and to try and vote without relying on misinformation.
Now, we're just 6 weeks out from Election Day, and today is National Voter Registration Day. Every 4 years, we are told the same thing, that this is the most important election of our lifetime. But this one is. When we vote, our values are put into action and our voices are heard. Your voice is a reminder that you matter, because you do, and you deserve to be heard.
This election, I'm not going to be able to vote here in the US. But many of you may not know that I haven't been able to vote in the UK my entire life. As we approach this November, it's vital that we reject hate speech, misinformation, and online negativity.
They obviously did not endorse a particular candidate, but it can be quite accurately assumed that they were for Biden's presidential candidacy and election. Before Meghan actually married into the royal family, she was a very vocal critic of Donald Trump. She called him a misogynist, and also a very divisive leader and just human being in general. And I don't think that just the act of getting married in any way would have nullified that opinion and also her political stance. I think what is important to remember, irrespective of whether it breaks UK protocol or not, is that Meghan Markle differs from the vast majority of royals in that, firstly, she is an American Hollywood actress, and Hollywood is incredibly political. Hollywood is notorious for its politics and for bringing politics into cinema, into the arts, etc. She may have married into British royalty, but at the end of the day, she is the same American, career-driven, independent woman that she was and that Harry was attracted to and married. She has an established fan base, as does any celebrity, and the difficulty, I believe, is that she is and has been known for who she was prior to marrying into the royal family. Before she married into the royal family, she was also able to vote and was expected to vote. I think the paradox which she finds herself in is having to balance between, on the one hand, having to appease a fan base that has already been established and knows her for Meghan Markle, the actress, the Hollywood political activist, the woke person of colour taking down the man. And then on the other hand, having to navigate between a fan base which knows her primarily via her marriage to Harry, and thus her assimilation into the royal family, which has a very different set of codes of celebrity. The royal family is not allowed to vote, and I think for Harry, for instance, not to have voted all his life, no royal member of the royal family can vote, it's not allowed. I think that's very different from sort of an entire life of not being able to vote relative to sort of coming from a life, especially within an American context where the right to vote is sort of integral to being American, where those principles associated with voting and the democratic process are pretty profound to the vast majority of Americans, an aspect of their not just national but self-identity. To go from that being a significant part of your identity to suddenly not being allowed to even express a word of opinion about your politics, I think that is very difficult and is a lot to ask of someone. And I think that this is an instance of where the royal institution is archaic, and we all know that it is archaic. But a lot of archaic institutions have had to progress or have had to evolve or permit leeway. And I think this is a good example of where that could have been done with the case of Meghan. Of course, it should be a case-to-case basis, but I think for somebody who is not a primary member of the royal family, who is from a completely different culture and country, to somehow expect them to completely distance themselves from something that has been very important to them personally and also publicly, that is a significant ask. For Meghan Markle to have met Donald Trump would have had far more, I think, negative implications for her than if, for instance, Kate Middleton had, inevitably. And I think this is because of a very specific set of circumstances surrounding Meghan being from America, Meghan being very vocally democratic, Meghan being a person of colour in a world and a political atmosphere in which identity politics is significant, especially when there have been so many accusations levelled at Donald Trump of being racist, of being also misogynistic, of being somebody who does not really respect sort of everything that Meghan Markle represents publicly and comes from, especially to her established fan base who have sort of been behind her since she was sort of an independent American actress. When Piers says that being a royal means staying out of politics, yes, he is absolutely right about that. But these are not normal circumstances of being a royal. These rules and protocol were established and have been established primarily not based on any conception or thought that somebody like Meghan would marry into the family. The reason why it is theoretically so easy for a member of the royal family to stay out of politics is because of, for instance, the example of Harry. They are born into the institution. It's not that they marry into it from outside. I think people will use the example of Kate Middleton. Oh, Kate Middleton is from the outside and she married into the family and she's been quite successful at staying out of politics. Yes, but she's also very traditionally British. She also isn't as much of a commoner as the media, especially the tabloid media in the UK, likes to present her as. The leap which Meghan Markle is expected to make is far more astronomical than that Kate Middleton ever had to make. And that is not appreciated, especially in this narrative of comparing Meghan to Kate in the British tabloid press. Irrespective of what the UK press likes to say about Kate Middleton's common roots, she was born into considerable wealth and influence. I think she even has royal blood from her own lineage. I'm not necessarily certain of that, but I do think that there is some association there. In short, Kate Middleton lived a life prior to joining the royal family that was not the life experience of the vast majority of the British public. Additionally, Kate, in being British, has lived and grown up in an environment where she is surrounded by an atmosphere, as all of us who live in Britain are, of the royal family, the brand, the royal family. Meghan never grew up with this featuring significantly or even at all in her socio-political experience and in her politics. Her politics was very Americanized, and being from America, inevitably. Whether Piers likes it or not, her experience of growing up in American politics cannot necessarily as easily or in as short a term as this has been be completely segregated from the politics which she is now expected as a royal to ascribe to. It is a very, very, and I keep repeating this, difficult and extraordinary ask to expect somebody to do that. And I think it is, yes, something that, based on royal protocol, should be expected. But I think the expectations of the British public, but more so the British media, in her somehow becoming Kate Middleton, in a sense, is very unrealistic. And she deserved a lot more patience and a lot more time which the British media, in all fairness, was not willing to give her. So, yeah. So what has brought this all to the public attention in both America and the UK is that Meghan Markle and Harry gave an exclusive interview to Oprah Winfrey in Los Angeles, in their sort of neighborhood. I think they're effectively neighbors where they live. They haven't necessarily transferred themselves to an ordinary life, but nonetheless, they gave an interview with Oprah, which was sort of presented as this expose of the royal family, but also I think was more about Meghan's personal struggles in relation to fitting in and assimilating into the royal family, and also her first very vocal and personal critique of the British tabloid press and how she has been treated by them. Piers obviously had a lot to say about this, because he has a lot to say about Meghan, because as we've established, he has a very troubled relationship and association with Meghan. On March 9th, Piers Morgan stormed off the set of Good Morning Britain after being questioned very logically and reasonably by co-host Alex Bereford about his feelings toward Meghan, both personal and journalistically.
Yet you continue to trash her.
Okay, I'm done with this.
No.
Sorry, no.
Sorry.
Sorry.
Do you know what? That's pathetic.
You can trash me, mate, but not my own
No.
stuff. See you later.
I'm being...
Sorry, can't
This
do
is
this.
absolutely diabolical behaviour.
Piers Morgan blatantly dislikes Meghan Markle, at least publicly. I think this all stems from him liking her and having liked her and sort of seeing her evolution as a human being as we all evolve and change. But it is an evolution which she did not take him along with. This is the only problem that I have with his style of journalism or commentary. I think it's more so commentary than journalism. His dislike of Meghan, I think, stems from a place of emotive frustration, hurt and confusion as to why she ghosted him. This is also aligned to his patriotism and his defence of the crown. He is a royalist and he's very pro the royal family, as are most writers and contributors to the tabloid press. Again, the tabloid press seems to have this need to compare Meghan Markle to Kate Middleton, which Piers has also fallen into, I think more so not necessarily because he does compare them, in as much as it just adds fuel to his arguments and to his sentiment regarding how Meghan has changed and has sort of split association with him. Author Will Self wrote in a 2013 article about the confusing relationship Britons have with America and its people that overall it all boils down to the following. Somewhere in the troubling intersection between the American dream and the nightmarish patriotism engendered by manifest destiny, we Britons sense their Americans' collective self-belief. Piers says in his 2019 Mail Online article that Meghan cannot have both her cake and eat it too. According to Piers, she must ask herself whether she wants to be a member of the British royal family or a virtue-signalling political activist celebrity. For him, the fact that she cannot have both is obvious and does not need explanation. This is a very British mindset. Meghan is a born and raised liberal American. In my opinion, her actions, personality, and way of going about in the world demonstrate perfectly how American she stereotypically is, in clearly exhibiting a self-belief that is largely part of the American myth. All nations have this myth. I'm not just saying that Americans are gullible or whatnot. It's every nation. Similarly to how the British have this myth that the royal family is, sort of above and beyond, or a part of patriotism, irrespective of whether you believe that or not. It's still a myth that is collectively sort of espoused or put forward. I believe that in Meghan's subconscious or even conscious take on the world, she can have both her cake and eat it. She has that self-belief, that sort of very stereotypical American attribute in and of herself. The contrast in views can be seen in how both countries responded to the publication of Vogue magazine's September issue. I would argue that matters of identity and wokeness, or of identity politics and sort of anything attributed to being a social justice warrior in today's day and age, do not extend further than, firstly, The Guardian and other such left-leaning or liberal, central liberal affiliations. And secondly, they do not transcend the university culture and sphere. Kate Middleton more readily assimilates into royalism. She is a perfect example of a member of the royal family. Yeah, she definitely is not a feminist icon. Not that that's what she's going for, but she definitely isn't. Whereas Meghan was, and I think actually with her recent stance and her breaking from the royal family and taking one of their own with her, I think she definitely does, especially to Americans. And this can be seen in the response of the American press, very more liberal press, to the British press, excluding The Guardian and The Independent, I would say. But she's definitely sort of seen as sort of a woke warrior in the American press relative to the British press. So what I'm trying to get at is that we should respect what Meghan is and who she is. We should respect Meghan Markle, the person, who is an amalgamation of things, but she is first and foremost, I believe, a person. She's a person who has grown up in circumstances and situations that are very different to the royal experience, and they should be respected. She is American. She is a very political person. That's not suddenly going to be turned off just because she's followed her heart and married a prince. Simultaneously, I think we should respect Piers Morgan, and that Piers Morgan has himself also grown up in a situation and a context far removed from that of Meghan's. Their paths did align and they did connect, I think, in a very personal and intimate way, which nobody has any insight into, or really should have any insight into. Their acquaintance is their personal business and whatnot. Personally, I think he does deserve at least an explanation from Meghan as to why she broke contact with him. I know this is fairly controversial, and I know that if somebody does decide to cut someone out of their life, there is no entitlement for the person who has been affected by this to even have an explanation. I just think that it is the right thing to do. I think he has a perception that she has distanced herself completely from him because she's now moved on to, bigger and better things, and has therefore proved herself to just be like every single other American actor. But what I have read from her and about her is that is not really who she believes herself to be. Importantly, she does not believe herself to be that. I think it sort of follows this line, which is very common and now overused, of everybody thinks that they're a good person, irrespective of whether their actions demonstrate that or not. Meghan has not spoken at all publicly about Piers Morgan, which suggests to me that she didn't see their acquaintance as being as profound, perhaps, as he sees it as being. I think he is very hurt, he is very wounded, and of course, she does not need to stroke his ego or even acknowledge it. I just think it is the right thing to do in order to provide necessary closure for both of them. I think when you do decide to break with a person based on personal experience, I think it is healthy for both parties to understand the closure, for there to be a universal understanding of the end. And there hasn't been in this situation. And I don't think that that is something that any of the public needs to know about. I think any communication between Piers Morgan and Meghan Markle needs to be done on their own terms and in private and out of their public personas and sense of celebrity. I think it should be something that's just kept between them, and nobody needs to know about it or needs to comment on it as I'm doing right now. And that's why I would like to, and have, sort of try to defend him by not necessarily saying that Meghan Markle is a liar or is doing anything wrong, which is why I haven't really referred to the Oprah Winfrey interview too extensively, because that is her experience, that is her voice, and I don't feel that it's my place to say whether I believe her or not on that. I don't think it's anyone's place to say that, because it is very personal things that she's talking about. And similarly to how Piers has his personal feelings about his relationship with Meghan, that's his experience and that's for him to deal with. So yes, Piers has now quit Good Morning Britain. That's his choice. Good for him if he's decided to do that. I do think that it is a loss. Of course, I do think that now Susanna will be able to speak for the first time in years. I do think it's unfortunate though. He was very entertaining, very interesting, and I don't necessarily think that Good Morning Britain is associated with true journalism. I think it's far more for sort of entertainment and sort of people letting out steam about social issues and very petty things relative to sort of the broader political environment and world. So I do think it's unfortunate. I think he was a good aspect of the show, and it is sad to see him go. Even though I disagree with a lot of what he stands for, I do have respect for him as sort of a public figure. I think that he's done well, and I think even as a sort of modern journalist, he's good at what he does, insofar as a modern journalist is somebody who has absolutely no integrity, no standards, and is just looking for clout. I'd be very interested to actually hear about your opinions on this and whether you agree or disagree with me. Please keep things civil and criticism levelled at my opinions, not at my character. Thank you very much for watching and listening. I hope you found this sort of informative and interesting. I especially like to hear about opinions on sort of the difference between the sort of British and American cultural experiences and how this has sort of been represented by this microcosmic case. So with that in mind, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.